Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Nashville, it's time for Nashville Business Radio. Now, here's your host.
And hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Nashville Business Radio. I'm John Ray, and folks, this will be a good one today, I promise you, because we're chatting with Jamie Cox, and Jamie is a brand strategist and designer. Jamie, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
It's a pleasure. Hey, let's talk about you and how you're serving folks. Tell us a little bit about your practice.
Yeah. So I started freelancing as a brand strategist and designer in the middle of the pandemic in 2020, or what I thought was the middle of the pandemic, but it just kept going. So I stuck with it. So I've been doing this for professionally for over 10 years, but on my own for about 3 years now. And I work one-on-one with business owners to help them build their brand, find their voice, and connect with their target audience. So I work one-on-one with usually solopreneurs or small business startups that are looking to scale to kind of find their niche and find their brand why, what makes them tick, why they do what they do, and how to convey that to their audience to pull more people in and grow their business.
Tell us a little bit about your background, and I guess what really, first of all, what pulled you into branding, and yes. why that lights your fire, I guess, as it were, Jamie.
Yes, I feel like it's actually something that would probably annoy a lot of people, but I, play to, use it to my advantage. I have always asked a lot of questions and tried to dig a little bit deeper than surface level with any relationship I have. And so anyway, rewind. So I actually went to school thinking I was going to do music business. So I started an art management program. I'm from Indiana originally, went to IU, went about halfway through this art management program, focused in music, thinking I'm going to be a record producer, I guess is what I thought. And about halfway through the program, I was like, I do not like this at all, but I didn't want to throw everything out. I had always had an interest in design and art. I'd always loved to create. So I just shifted my focus to studio art and was more focused on the nonprofit sector and marketing for nonprofits, museums, symphonies, any sort of that like traditional art space. So after school, I moved to Nashville and got a job at a marketing agency, and it was fine. It was, like I said, that kind of more surface level, like this client needs you to do that. And I wasn't able to ask those questions that I wanted to. So I moved into tourism, where it's just a super fun space. I had a lot of flexibility. I worked for the Williamson County Convention and Visitors Bureau here in Tennessee for about 5 years. Yeah. And I worked on the marketing team started as a marketing coordinator and then moved into a creative services role. So I had kind of seen all of the marketing pieces happening, and I was facilitating those, the projects from start to finish. So seeing all of those connections happen really just sparked something in me, and I was able to dig deeper and explore what made Franklin, Tennessee, and made it so special for so many people, whether they were locals or visitors. So I was there for 5 years and just felt like it was time for a change. I went back to the agency world, and knowing that I wanted to start my own business. And I knew I needed some more experience in that client relationship space. So I did that in mostly the business to business space, a lot of service-based businesses. And then, like I said, when the pandemic hit, it was like not really the opportune time, but it was just like, this is the time to take more time for myself. So I started my business then and have really been able to grow from there and like play into that part of me that just wants to know, why do you do that? Why? How'd you get here? Like learning people's stories and then telling those stories has really just been a great fit for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That must have taken a lot of courage for the pandemic to hit and for you to think I'm not ready, or this is not the time, or whatever was going through your head. but you had misgivings, let's put it like that. But you went ahead. I mean,
Yes.
let's give some advice to people that are in that frame of mind. I mean, how you did what you did.
Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily recommend what I did to other people. I just know myself, and I trust myself more than I trust anybody else. So I had always had I always knew that I wanted to do something on my own. I've just always kind of gone my own way, carved my own path. So I think that's always been lingering in my mind, but not having a backup plan really motivated me. So before, I always had my full-time work, my salary job, my health insurance to kind of push me to do this self-employed stuff on the side. Well, when I left that, it was like, it's go time. It's now or never. This is my shot. So, and I gave myself a timeline. I said, okay, if I, in 6-ish months, if things aren't working out the way I hope they would, or, I'm really struggling, or I'm not struggling financially, struggling emotionally, it's stressful, then maybe it's not for me. So I gave myself that time. I worked really hard during that time. I asked for a lot of help. I just kind of, knew that my friends, my connections, my family, my former coworkers all supported me. So asking for help when I needed it was really important. And so, yeah, I think asking for help is probably the best advice I could give, but maybe don't quit your job on the fly. I'm a little impulsive in that way.
Well, so you burn the ships, as it were, I guess, as that old saying goes. But it's worked for you. I mean, how do you judge the reasons for your success? I mean, because we were in the pandemic, did you just see a lot of other folks that had started their own business that needed that branding help, and it really was good timing for you after all?
Yes. Yeah. I think I saw a lot of people that were in similar situations to me as me that were just like, I need a change. I need something for myself. Who knows what the world holds? This is time. So I was able to plug in to a lot of different digital groups in that time. So there's a group in Nashville called Startup Nashville. I met a lot of people through there who were just willing to make introductions, or they were saying, hey, I'm working on this project. I'd love to talk to you. And I always came into all of those conversations not really expecting any sort of business to come from it, but just more so using that time to feed that social part of me that I wasn't getting when I was at home. But I mean, just going in with an open mind and willing to share and also willing to listen, I think helped me tremendously in growing my connections, which in turn grew my business.
So you mentioned solopreneurs are a big segment for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's talk about brand strategy generally, but for a solopreneur and just what that looks like.
Yeah. So I'd say when I work with one-on-one with a solopreneur, there's a few different situations I usually see. The first is it is truly just them. The second, it is them, and they maybe have contracted with some various people to help them get where they are. The number one question I get from people who are running their business themselves is if their face isn't their business, like if they aren't an influencer, for example, is how do I separate myself from my brand? So maybe they own a business and they want to eventually write a book as themselves. So how to brand themselves separately from branding their business, but still incorporate themselves into the story of how their business came to be. Because we know people buy from people, not, faceless businesses. So that's the biggest question I get, and kind of the biggest hurdle that I think a lot of business owners have to overcome, me included. My business is my name. And sometimes it's hard to separate all the things I'm interested in from my business, and also separate my personal life from my business. When, I'm Jamie Cox, brand strategist, I'm also Jamie Cox, a lot of other things. So anyway, working with solopreneurs on that in particular has been, I think, eye-opening for me, eye-opening for them. And then also just figuring out, helping them understand how to outsource things that they, a lot of people are trying to do it themselves. And that's not always the best approach because there's somebody out there who can do it more efficiently. So you're spending less time. So for example, building a website. I see a lot of people try to do that themselves. They're not an expert. They just, they might know enough to be dangerous. And it's gotten them this far, but hiring somebody else to do that, for example, is going to be a lot more efficient. And they'll also have an unbiased perspective toward your business and be able to guide you a little bit more toward what your audience wants, not what you personally want.
Yeah. Your biggest competition is the do-it-yourselfer, I guess, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Respect for the do-it-yourselfer.
Right.
But I think we all get to a point in our lives, in our business, when we're just like, I don't want to spend time doing X, Y, and Z. Like, it's driving me nuts. So, I personally have been in that situation where I'm like, I'm not the best person to do this for myself. Who can help me?
Well, and I would think that's particularly important to engage one like you for branding, because you really need that third-party perspective, that independent perspective. This is not like bookkeeping or something like that if you're doing your own books, right? This is really important. This is your face to the world, right? How you present yourself and your business to the world. Talk about that.
Right. Yeah. So, it's really important, I think, to have an unbiased perspective when it comes to marketing your business, because I think it's really easy to say, I'm the best at this. Sure. I think you're great at it too, but there's to acknowledge that you have competition in the market that is doing something similar or going after the same customer is really important. And just putting your blinders up to that is eventually going to be your demise. So, anyway, working kind of at an unbiased perspective to build a brand, I actually approach projects from a messaging perspective first. So how are we telling your story? And then with my design background, I marry that with the actual identity. So brand identity, logo, icons, colors, typography, all of that, how those elements are also telling that brand story that we've developed. And that's when that personal opinion becomes really strong, and we kind of have to break through some walls there. Somebody might be like, oh, I don't like the color orange because I hate Tennessee. Okay. But based on your brand, we know your brand is vibrant and bold and, breaks the mold. Right. So orange is a great bright color that's going to show that to your customers in a kind of subconscious way. So learning to communicate that and marrying that marketing background with the visual interest and the creativity that I have has been really fun.
Let's talk about services folks, for example, those folks that their factory floor is between their ears, and right. And,
yes.
and that I guess they're tied up, and rightly so, because they're brilliant people. They're tied up in thinking that maybe it's all about what I know. Right. And how do you communicate with them that it's really something more than that, that branding is something more than what you know?
Yeah. So I think I like to ask people when I start working with them, what are some brands or businesses that they gravitate to? And, a lot of people say Nike, Peloton, whatever it is. And I always ask why. Again, back to that question of why. And nobody's ever talking about, Peloton knows everything about fitness and I want to know everything about it. Nobody's ever saying that. They're saying something like, I really thrive when I'm riding with this X, Y, and Z instructor. They have a way in motivating me that I didn't know I could be motivated. And that's that emotional response that everybody has toward brands. And so I think getting people that own businesses in service, whether it's service-based or product-based, to realize the emotional connection and the emotional investment they have in brands they're interested in kind of flips the table for them to see, people need that emotional connection with my brand as well.
I love that example. That really makes a lot of sense. So, you really gave a preview of what my next question is, but talk about how you an engagement with, well, maybe just before we get to engagement, let's talk about a conversation with you. How does that unfold, and what do folks need to bring to the table to get at what's going to be successful for them?
Yeah. So I have, I think people approach problems in different ways. Some people approach problems with a problem and they say, this is what I'm running into. Other people approach problems with a solution and say, this is what I need. I find the best work comes from people that approach it as a problem and say, I don't know what the solution is, or I have a few ideas about what the solution is, but I'd love to talk through those ideas. So I typically start any sort of project with an introduction meeting where I'm asking questions about their business, surface level, sort of like, what do you do? How long have you been doing it? What problems are you seeing? Why are you looking to work with somebody like me? And that kind of opens the door for if they are saying, well, here's, some issues that we've had, or here's what we're trying to do and we just can't seem to get there. So people that approach any project with an open mind seems to be the most successful. I think a lot of people are like, oh, I just need this one thing and my business is going to be like, sky high. And that's not necessarily true, because it might not be the actual thing they need, because they haven't done the research to understand what their customer actually wants. So open mind, I'd say, is the best way to approach a conversation. And that's how every project starts, is with that introduction and just kind of me getting to know you.
Do you find that sometimes when you work with a client, their idea of their ideal client, or their avatar, I guess, as that term goes, changes? That they really have been going after the wrong market? Yes.
I think a lot of people a lot of business owners, people in general, like to think they are for everyone. Mm-hmm. And that's just not the case. They're not. So usually I see people think they're for everyone and they niche down to, okay, actually our target audience is between the age of 30 and 40. They make this much money. They live in this region. They like these things. Whereas, you might have services that appeal to everyone, but the bulk of your audience is going to be in a specific demographic. Mm-hmm. Even if you have some outliers. I mean, that's just statistics.
Yeah, that makes sense. Folks, we're here chatting with Jamie Cox, and she has her own brand strategy and design firm. Let's talk about content creation. Speaking of do-it-yourselfers, let's talk about content creation and what makes for, first of all, why it's important, and what makes for successful content creation.
Yeah. So if you think about the content that you're consuming, whether that's on Instagram, LinkedIn, just kind of scrolling through the internet. I just say getting lost in the internet, going down a rabbit hole. The things you gravitate towards. So typically businesses are pulling you in rather than pushing you to buy something. So content creation is really important because it's that top of the funnel. So it's the first time somebody interacts with your brand, the chances of them either buying your product, utilizing their services, if they've just stumbled upon your website and they're there for 10 seconds, the chances of conversion are probably pretty low. So instead, creating content that will pull them in to want to know more about you, and knowing that you do have a lead funnel where, there's the top of the lead funnel where it's that brand awareness. There's kind of the second hit of that brand awareness, eventually moving down to that conversion. So that content creation is the top. It applies to the top of the brand funnel where people are finding you, learning your story, learning more about your services and how you're different from your competitors, why they should work with you. So whether you're creating content for social media or writing blogs, and that's stuff that we dig into based on your audience. So where is your audience? That's where you need to focus creating your content. And then as far as creating content, understanding your voice and how you say what you say is really important. So you can tap into that emotional part of your customers. And then visually, with certain platforms, most platforms now are super visual focused. So working with a professional designer to create content that's going to pair well with whatever your message is and draw people in, whether it's through an ad or just an organic post. It's really important to remain consistent. So, focusing on voice, focusing on visual identity, focusing on that target audience, and remaining consistent across the board when you're creating content, and just consistently creating content is really important.
And I guess part of it too is having the right platform too, right? Because not all social media platforms are created equal.
Right. And your target audience might not be on some platforms. I think a lot of people, there's a saying, and part of my language, it's, I would rather full ass one thing than half ass a bunch of things.
I love that. Yeah.
So focusing, if you are personally, I see this a lot with solopreneurs again, is if they are doing their social media, they maybe don't have the budget, or they just like to do it, rather than spreading themselves thin across a bunch of channels that aren't converting, focusing really, all of their energy on one channel, and producing content in that space until they get kind of a process down with that, where it's going, smoothly, easily. They can quickly create content because they have all those elements they need. Then expanding into other channels, it's, I believe, the best approach for creating content, rather than putting stuff that's so out on, 8 channels a day. It's just kind of speaking into a void at that point.
Yeah. So, pardon my way of putting it, but it's really a little bass backwards, right? I mean,
yes.
Right. So, and I guess where I'm going with that is that, people focus on blanketing. I need to blanket the world, and what they forget, and I'm referring to you, solopreneurs, is that they don't realize or don't think about the fact they really don't need that much business to move the meter in their business. I mean, they need a handful of clients every year to make their business grow nicely, as much as they can handle, right?
Right.
And so doing one channel or one platform really well can fulfill that need.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to think about your customer's journey in the content space. So for example, if you decide Instagram's your channel, you're great at posting, but then you don't really have anywhere for that audience to convert. So you're not driving traffic back to your website. You don't have an email listed. Then you're really just posting content to post content, because nobody knows how to reach you or how to utilize your services. So it's thinking a little bit beyond, here's my one channel, but how am I converting them to? So thinking again, further down that funnel, and you might have different funnels for different channels too, as you expand, but you are totally right to not canvas everything. I think some people just get burnout on seeing you, honestly, after a while.
Oh, come on. I can't believe people would think that. Jamie Cox is with us, folks, and she's a brand strategist and designer. So Jamie, let's talk about ideal clients for you. You mentioned solopreneurs, or is that still in play for you? And talk about those that are great fits.
Yeah. So I love working with solopreneurs. So I try to stay in that market. I do work with some smaller startup that might be 1 or 2 founders who are looking to grow. So it's still that kind of one-on-one connection, or 1-on-2 connection in some cases. So usually solopreneurs in the service space. So usually consumer services. So they're providing a service, whether that's locally or online to, the entire world. So usually service-based businesses. I have a very special place in my heart for package design. So I have done a lot of product-based, like consumer packaged goods work as well. And really just anybody that is a small business looking to kind of revamp the way they've been doing things. I found that as I work with service-based businesses, they're like, oh, you should talk to so-and-so. And it just opens a door into a new market that I hadn't even thought of before. So I never want to close myself off to any sort of industry. I think with such a wild gamut of people I've worked with in my background in tourism and agencies, it's hard for me to say, no, I don't work in that space. But that to say, solopreneurs, service-based businesses is kind of my bread and butter right now.
Well, the great thing about solopreneurs is you know who the decision maker is, right? I mean,
Yes.
you don't have to figure that out. So that's good. Well, I would love it, Jamie, if you would talk about a success story or two. And if mentioning names is not appropriate, that's fine. But just as an example of the great work you do.
Yeah. So I've worked with a lot of clients over the short time that I've been kind of doing this on my own. And it's funny to kind of rack my brain and go through the history of everybody I've worked with. Mm-hmm. I say yes to projects that I'm interested in that I think will be a good fit and will be successful. So not to say everything is a success story, like a true success story, but we do see a lot of positive results for a lot of my clients. So in the service-based space, I have one client who I've worked with for over a year and a half who was just looking to expand their online presence and grow their business, and with the eventual outcome to sell the business and retire. So we have been able to position them to grow their social presence by, again, focusing in on those key markets and connecting directly with their audience to speak to their audience about those problems that they have arising each and every day, and how this service provider can solve those problems. So we've been able to grow their Instagram following by, I think, like 500 people who are actively engaged. It's not like bots that are just liking stuff. So actively engaged customers there. We've also increased their impressions to over 15,000 a month, which is great for a small business provider that is providing a service locally too. Mm-hmm. And it's a super niche service. So that's been one success story, and just kind of building, helping them to get out of the marketing part so they can focus on providing a better service. They've grown their business to have to outsource some of their services to other contractors, which is great because it's slowly removing them from the business to the point where they will be able to sell it. Additionally, I actually did a collaborative project last year, and it was super fun because I got to step out of the brand strategy role and work with another brand strategist. So they had actually worked with, it was a jewelry maker in town, in Nashville. Mm-hmm. And this brand strategist had worked with them to come up with that brand positioning, which is normally what I do. And then this brand strategist reached out to me and said, I would love for you to handle the brand identity. I have a calligrapher working on the actual logo project. So you'll run creative direction, taking my brand strategy and implementing it into the real world. So I got to do a ton of fun design for that, which is something that I felt like I had taken a little bit of a step back from, but I got to do like a whole brand piece. So logo, icons, typography, color palette, all of that, and then implement it in both the digital space through web design. I consulted on their website design project with another contractor. I also designed all of their packaging. So when they ship something to somebody in California who's ordered a piece of custom jewelry, they have this really cool setup that is a true experience when their customer opens that piece. It's more than just the jewelry inside. It's these little tiny touches that make it feel really special and personal. So that was a really fun project. I'm looking forward in the future as I grow to collaborate with more people in all sorts of spaces, and just kind of, it's nice to work with other people after you've worked alone for a little bit.
Well, it's nice to have the freedom to be able to zig and zag as you wish, right? And that's really what you've got.
Yes. And that's what I've wanted from the beginning of my career, is just the freedom to call the shots. Okay.
Now I've got to ask the most important question. You teach spin classes.
I do.
So you didn't know I was going to go there, did you?
I didn't. I was wondering.
Yeah. So why is a spin class the best form of fitness that someone can take?
Oh, yeah. Well, I see it as way more than a form of fitness. I actually found spin in a time when I didn't really know I needed it. I had dealt with a lot of grief in my personal life and just did not know how to process it.
Mm-hmm.
So I found this studio here locally in Nashville. It's called Verticity. It's not where I teach, but it's where I learned to ride and where I kind of fell in love.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it's great because it is a dark room. Nobody knows what you're going through, and you are just truly putting one foot in front of another, not going anywhere. And it's just like, this is what I'm doing for an hour. And it is my time to do that. The instructors, if you find a great instructor, they motivate you in a way that you maybe didn't know that you needed. They give you the space that you need to do whatever it is, whether that's you're there to sweat or you're there to cry and think about something. Sometimes I do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's why it's been great for me. So last July, in July of 2021, I decided to pursue just kind of doing coach training to see if I liked it. I wanted to deepen my practice and tap into that coaching mentality.
Right.
I thought I didn't really know what I would get out of it. I was like, I don't really know if I want to teach. What I got out of it was a whole new perspective on my business though, too, because it was like, oh, I am in some ways a coach to business owners. And this is how I can pull stuff out of them that I didn't know how to before. So this is how I can motivate them to take the next step and encourage them to pursue that thing that they maybe are hesitant about. So that was kind of what happened when I did spin instructor training. And then this January, I started teaching at a studio in Nashville called Crank Fit.
Mm-hmm.
We do spin classes, hit classes, all sorts of stuff. But for me, it's really just about being in a room with people who are excited to focus on themselves and, cheer each other on. Love a good playlist. So I'm mostly there for the dance party, but if you ever want to just come sweat and have a good time, that's what spin is.
I love it. That's terrific. Jamie Cox, folks. Jamie, this has been fun and informative, the best combination there is. So, but let's get to the most important question, which is for those that have heard something that makes them want to reach out and connect with you. How can they do that?
Yeah, so you can find my work at Jamie, Jamieer Cox.com. So I talk more about my work. I have a blog there as well with some resources. I also have a free resource for business owners who are kind of trying to figure out why they do what they do. It's called Write Your Way to Why. It is a free 5-day course that they will write journal prompts and discover why they do what they do. And you can also reach me at my email. It's hello@jamiercox.com. And you can find me on Instagram at JMERCox.
Terrific. Jamie Cox, folks. Jamie, this has been fun. And
thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Sure. Hey, folks, just a quick reminder, you can find Nashville Business Radio on all the major podcast apps, and you can also just do it. I guess this is the old-fashioned way. Just going to NashvilleBusinessRadioX.com, and you can find our show archive. And if you're not subscribed to the show, we love it if you would do that, and we appreciate your support. So for my guest, Jamie Cox, I'm John Ray. Join us next time here on Nashville Business Radio.